So, welcome to the Kickass Midlife Method podcast. And tonight we are doing something on overwhelm. It is probably the number one thing that I see come across in coaching forums with the women in the community, some of whom are joining us tonight. So, I'm recording this kind of as we approach Christmas time, but actually feeling overwhelmed is totally unrelated in my experience to festive time and particularly in midlife. It can really hit hard. So we're going to be discussing that and how to feel grounded and calm. So understanding midlife overwhelm. So any of you in the chat, give me a 1 out of 10 for how overwhelmed you're feeling at the moment, with one being not overwhelmed at all, five being, yeah, I'm okay, and 10 being like off the scale of how you're feeling right now. Oh, Claire, well done. Two. Everyone else is yeah. So a bit of a mixture, bit of a mixture. Half and half, I'd say below five and above five. And obviously, so we're going to discuss practical solutions as well to help hidden factors which you might not have considered, which may be contributing to your feeling of overwhelm, as well as that hormone impact on overwhelm. I know that I have suffered from it hugely in the past. I'm a lot better now at recognizing it. So, what is it? It's, complete capacity overload when cognitively, your emotional demands, decision making just outstrip your emotional and functional capacity to process and manage them. So common signs. So I don't know if anybody has had this week, racing thoughts that you just can't calm down, persistent anxiety, irritability, or depression. I've definitely had the irritability one a lot in the past. Procrastination, so that feeling of frozen. So you're completely overwhelmed. You've got loads to do, but you're also totally procrastinating, don't know which one to do first. It's a really, really common sign. Constant sense of being like behind on everything. It's really difficult to make even the smallest decisions. So you go endlessly backwards and forwards and round in circles. And then physical tension in your body, which you might not even associate with it, with the fact that you're overwhelmed, but actually aches and pains. So if you were to say which one you suffer from the most when you are feeling overwhelmed, which of those would yours be? If you put that in the chat, just to make sure that you're all listening along. I think mine's irritability too, actually. Closely followed by procrastination. So a bit of a mix again of those, a lot of irritability. So midlife load, why is it worse in midlife? Do you feel like it is worse in midlife? I definitely feel like, and overthinking, that is also a really good one, Kirsty. So midlife, we might have felt overwhelmed when you're younger, but if you think back on when you're in your 20s, were there many occasions where you felt overwhelmed? I can't think of hugely for me that many, but maybe some of you did. Oh, you did. Okay. But in midlife, we've obviously got loads more going on. Career responsibilities for some, a peak in my 20s. Okay. Career, we might get onto that and why that is. Career responsibility now, senior roles with high stakes, demanding schedules. Also, on the flip side of that, some people at this age are thinking about changing career, and there's also retirement, also, which also throws another pressure sometimes into the mix, or being retired. Emotional load. There's so much going on in this life chapter. We've got divorces, separation, bereavement, all sorts going on. So there's small wonder that that overwhelm kind of kicks in. The sandwich generation related to that, caring for children, kids at university and aging parents. And then financial pressure can sometimes mount a little bit more. Mortgages if they're not paid off, university fees, and supporting multiple generations, kids who are boomeranging back at 30 and upwards. So yeah, it's not surprising that the pressure kind of really mounts. And then this comes to personality type, I think, and there are lots of women in this community, and I'm probably also similar, where you are probably the kind of person that has always valued being highly organized, on top of everything. You say yes to everything because actually you're just really used to like getting things done, doing it really quickly, really capable. So you think that's what your default because you've always been that type of person who can do it. Constant self-monitoring, always taking responsibility for outcomes and you wanting those outcomes to be perfect because that's the kind of person you are. Always maintaining high standards. And what happens now, however, I don't know whether any of you can recognize this, that it has sometimes can switch into being hyper vigilant at everything. You can't switch off. You feel responsible for everything. Don't trust anyone else to do anything. You find it really difficult to let someone else do something. And if they make a mistake, it just reinforces that whole thing of like, I should have just done it myself anyway. And that inability to delegate or let go. And so often the most highly capable women often are the ones who struggle the most with overwhelm because you've just grown up and been conditioned to be that woman who does everything and you manage to do everything and it's all right for years and years and years until suddenly it's not. That overwhelms too much. And partly the old hormone connection, everything does feel harder because everything is harder because that hormone connection does affect things. Um, so serotonin absolutely affects your mood regulation. So we are more vulnerable to lower moods and emotional shifts. GABA, which is an amino acid, which is that calming neurotransmitter, becomes less effective. So, that ability to feel calmer, deregulate yourself is affected if you don't have other systems and lifestyle practices in place. And your stress response system just means that you become smaller stresses trigger bigger responses nowadays. So common effects, anxiety without an obvious cause. I speak to a lot of women on the phone who suffer from that, who suffering from anxiety, literally crippling, can't go out sometimes, or once they would be able to present at work, find that really, really difficult. Driving the car, I think Davina McCall obviously spoken about that, being anxiety and anxious about going out and driving because she couldn't actually remember sometimes where she was going when she was taking the kids somewhere. Emotional volatility and tearfulness, or the flip side of that sometimes can actually be total flat mood, where something you're used to, like something bringing you up, and that thing just doesn't work anymore. Poor sleep quality, brain fog. Um, and studies show that perimenopausal women have 40% higher risk of depression compared to premenopause. And then this one, there's loads at the moment about neurodiversity and ADHD in midlife women. I was speaking to a doctor the other day, and he said that they are no longer screening for this because the NHS has been so overwhelmed by the number of people wanting a diagnosis around ADHD to find it that they're actually no longer doing it because it's just too backed up. But there does seem to be increasing evidence that ADHD is underdiagnosed in women, and that symptoms that you masked in childhood tend can manifest themselves a little bit more as hormone change happens because those symptoms of ADHD can become heightened with less hormones. So, and when you're younger or as you got older, you just developed really elaborate coping mechanisms that are now failing. I'm not saying anybody on this call is necessarily ADHD, but it is worth thinking about that, thinking about the way you respond and whether it is something that might be affecting you. So focus or organization deteriorate noticeably, emotional regulation becomes more challenging, coping bandwidth becomes more difficult, and things that worked don't suddenly stop working. So that's also, it's just something worth thinking about. Again, there's no kind of there's no solution other than lifestyle changes, but sometimes it can help for you to know. And then the other thing related maybe to ADHD, but also to a personality type, is perfectionism. What perfectionism sounds like. I should be able to cope with this. I can't let my standards slips. If I can't do it properly, I won't start. and I can do it faster and better myself. And what that tends to do, and I hold my hand up, I've definitely been one of those. I can do it better and faster myself, and I can't let my standards slip. So, totally one of those. And what it creates, which I'm also really aware of now in myself, is rigid, all or nothing thinking, definite decision paralysis and procrastination, where you'll go round and round in circles because you want it to be perfect and therefore you can't make a decision at all. Chronic relentless stress and burnout, and that inability to ask for help, and constant self-criticism. Now, I often ask women in the community for their win on a Wednesday. Lots of the women now are used to it, so that you're getting more used to actually celebrating your wins. But at the beginning, there are so many women who can't actually identify what a win is. You're brilliant at identifying what you didn't do well and how you're not doing well. But in terms of recognizing what you are doing well, sometimes that's really difficult. So, in a nutshell, you're understanding the overwhelm in midlife and why it suddenly feels harder sometimes is the hormonal changes combined with potentially a personality traits, your expectations, maybe neurodiversity, and obviously life pressure. Everything is harder because there is loads more going on. So, what you need is smarter, more compassionate strategies that work with you, not against you, and a little bit of perspective as well. I think part of the reason I wanted to do this webinar in particular is because we all go around saying, yes, I feel really overwhelmed, I'm really overwhelmed. But sometimes it takes to sit back and reflect and think, okay, I am overwhelmed. What does that mean for me? How am I going to change that and get out of that overwhelm? And sometimes it's about perspective and realizing that other people feel the same sometimes, and that doing some lifestyle things are as important just because it takes you out of that headspace to actually get a bit more perspective, which hopefully many of you on the program are getting anyway because you are committing to your exercise. So that in itself, aside from, oh, you're building strength, it just takes you out of your normal everyday and gives you a bit of a breather, gives you a bit of perspective. Some of you are doing your breath work, hopefully, and that would also help, not just from the perspective point of view, but from your autonomic nervous system. So mindset switches to be thinking about, rather than I should be able to cope, I'm crap. Why can't I cope with this? I've just got to work harder to be able to cope with it. Think about, I'm actually at capacity. And it's not a sign of weakness or failure. I'm at capacity. I'm doing loads. I'm bloody good at what I'm doing, but there's a limit and I'm important in this. And so, from perfectionism as well, thinking about progress and good foundations for change. And from automatically saying yes to everything, or yes, I can cope, yes, I can do this, creating those kind of boundaried responses and thinking about what those boundary responses are before you potentially get yourself into a situation that you would normally just say yes to everything. So I was speaking about this with one person on this call today, earlier in the week, where we were talking about, if you know that you have a particular behavior trait where you just say yes or you just behave in a certain way, recognizing the environment that will trigger that before you go in, and thinking about your responses before you go in, because otherwise it's really easy to fit to default. So planning an organization is a one way of doing this. So I've talked about this a lot in the group lately about actually planning and organizing your calendar. So you, and when I say on a calendar digitally, I've found, compared to writing it on I've tried everything. I've done Trello boards. If any of you've heard Trello boards, I've done to-do lists on my notes on my Mac, so little check boxes. I've done the notepad, and the notepad gets longer and longer, and then I lose the notepad and get even more overwhelmed because I can't remember which notepad I wrote my list in. And so what I found works really well for me, which might be worth you trying it, is actually plotting everything in a digital calendar. I find it much easier to do it on my laptop rather than the mobile, because the mobile is quite hard to use. Right the way through to literally what time I'm going to the gym, when am I eating, when am I making my food to eat, what's my buffer, the tasks I've got to do for the day. And why that's really good is you can then color code it And honestly, initially, I have to confess, I found it that almost a bit overwhelming. And I've had to realize if you just breathe into it, it becomes not overwhelming. Because what it does is it taught me that I'm trying to do too much. And so eventually, if you stick with it, you realize that all the things you put in your calendar, you slowly start whittling that down. And it becomes really easy to actually appreciate how much you do in your day and give yourself a bit more of a kind of be a bit kinder to yourself, that there is only so many hours in the day, and the tasks that you might set yourself that you write down in your on your notepad is impossible, is impossible. And I admit I used to do those things where I'd forget to block in time for eating, and I'd do meetings and meetings, and then think, oh, I forgot I actually have to eat. So yeah, and then instead of doing a to-do list at the end of the day for the next day, do a done list. I think that can be really groundbreaking and then help you appreciate. I can't see that. Is that to do is that your to-do list book? Yeah. Really good to do a to done list, because then you can, as you plot that out, you'd be like, oh my God, I've like done loads. That's pretty amazing. Instead of being like, I'm shit, I've missed all these things. I've got to take them on to the next day and take them on to the next day, and on it goes on. And so you end your day just feeling overwhelmed because you've not got through that to-do list and you've just given yourself another one. And no instant yes to any request. Pause before you instantly email someone back or text someone back saying yes. Just think, do I actually have to say yes to that? And then the body-based tools, which often a lot of us are doing already. So your exercise, obviously, anyone in this program is doing that. Your breathing. So I've spoken about this loads on webinars about the benefits of breathing. So it doesn't have to be a full yoga set. It doesn't have to be a full Kapalabhati breathing set. It literally can be like 2 or 3 minutes, breathing in, inhaling through your nose for four, hold for two, retention for two, four out. So you do double, uh, half the time you breathe in, you retain, and then you double exhale on the way out. And if you try and just count that in, count that out, it can just help you get out of that overwhelmed state, just reset you. And there's science behind this as well. It's not just a kind of hippie yoga thing. There is science behind it. There's a really good book, which I mentioned before, by James Nestor called Breathe, which is really good, worth reading. Micro pause, 30 seconds between tasks before you go from one to the other, like that. Just give yourself a little bit of a pause. Obviously, nutrition. We forget how much nutrition affects our stability and our mood and our sense of calm. So, there are foods that release certain things that really help to calm you. So thinking about also all of those carbohydrate sources that are releasing energy more slowly are going to be better for regulating your emotional response as well. Sleep. I still hear some of you talking about phones in your bedroom. Like, I honestly would get rid of your phone in your bedroom and get an alarm clock. They're all over Instagram at the moment. Alarm clocks being sold, I can see, like to help women get out of using, or men as well, using their phones. So really protect that sleep. And then movement. So these are not just lifestyle things, they actually affect your nerve system. So yeah,